Hello and welcome to this month's JW Broadcast Rebuttal on God's One True channel. Now, I'm not going to do a monthly rebuttal of all the broadcasts, but this month in particular, they were really asking for a hard rebutting, and so we're going to give that to them. Now, it leads in with Stephen Lett, and I heard someone else say that I think this is the first time he's been on or he's hosted the broadcast in like 2 years. And the first thing I noticed about him was that he actually looked a bit better, I thought, than he looked last month with the update that was released. I initially saw the update about cheersing from a non-official source. I saw it on Reddit. And so I was instantly suspicious that it was actually AI because it looked a bit weird. He was wearing glasses that I'd never seen him wear before. And he looked a bit off. And the content was so bizarre that, I just had to check the actual source that it was coming from, the organization itself, in order to fully appreciate and believe the insanity that it was. It's like, this isn't just someone's concocted insanity. No, this is actually official JW.org branded insanity. Anyway, this is the introduction that we get to Stephen Lett. I've just clipped random bits and pieces, but I thought we'd start with this little anecdote, which, let's just see what he has to say.
A sister told me that her little 5-year-old son was looking in a mirror and making various expressions with his face and eyes. His mother asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "I can't do like Brother Lett. I'll never be a circuit overseer." Well, I'm sure he soon learned that voluminous facial expressions are not a requirement for circuit work. In fact, they could be a disadvantage. By the way, thank you for putting up with me all these years.
Okay, so aside from the fact that that sounds a little bit like a goodbye, like he hasn't been hosting the broadcast for a couple of years, and then he leads in with this, which does sound a bit like a goodbye. So, maybe, I don't know, his health, whatever, who knows, but he's not getting any younger. But that's one interesting thing. The other interesting thing is just the random anecdote itself. But the other thing that really stood out to me from this little story was just how bizarre some of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses say are. Now, I'm not going to put the clip in here because I'm lazy and I can't be bothered, and everyone's seen the update with the cheersing is okay and all of that. But in that update, they said something really weird, and I feel like this kind of mirrors it. He has just said that, having voluminous facial expressions could actually be a disadvantage to circuit work, so what he's trying to do there is to have this self-deprecating humor where he's basically saying, far from imitating me in my weird facial expressions, it could actually be a distraction and be seen as too much and all of the things, which within Jehovah's Witness culture is 100% correct, right? You could be counseled if your talks on the platform were too engaging, too energetic, if the gestures were too big, if the facial expressions, if it felt like there was too many theatrics involved, it would be perhaps seen as being distracting from the message and drawing too much attention to oneself and all of that kind of thing, right? But it's just interesting that in trying to say something to essentially humanize himself and normalize him as a person and the organization generally and the broadcast and just try and be normal, he says this thing which is inherently just weird, right? Like, well, actually, if you have weird facial expressions, if you just naturally talk like in a particular way, then that actually might play against you. You might not be able to ascend the ranks and achieve this particular thing. You might not be able to go on circuit work because of this trait, which if it is something that is just a part of how you speak, that's a really weird thing to say. It's a really weird thing to have that kind of prohibitive factor or prerequisite that you not, speak a certain way, which ironically is very much the case, because we've all seen how, especially in more recent times, the language, especially conventions and the broadcasts, they have a very specific way of speaking. The morning worships are a classic example of this, where it's just like this sort of droning intonation, and they all kind of sound sort of the same. And that carries over into the congregation level, and that becomes the set standard. And so if you want to climb the ladder, you kind of need to conform to that standard. You need to be within a degree of tolerance of that standard. Or if you're seen as being outside of that, you might be drawing too much attention to yourself, and then maybe that's a disadvantage to you getting on the circuit work or whatever. Anyway, the thing that they said in the update, or the thing that he said rather in the update, which about this, which was really weird, he was again trying to make a comment about how normal they are and how we don't like to make rules about things. And he said that, for example, factoring in customs and what things might mean and not wanting to give the appearance of celebrating things. At Bethel, they like to have some string lights, right? Some Bethelites like to have string lights to decorate their rooms or their patios or whatever. And so in the interests of not being weird, in the context specifically of not being weird and not making unnecessary rules, he chooses, in an extraordinary use of free will, he chooses to cite an example in which Bethelites, they use string lights, they take them down in November and December, where it could be perceived that the string lights that they've had up the entire year are now celebrating Christmas, right? So for the consciences of others, and this is realistically, this is not for the outside world, right? Like, this is at Bethel. No one from the outside is really looking in. No one's paying that much attention. No one cares, right? So you just know that this is because of just the nosy, judgmental culture of the witnesses that are at Bethel, that they need to do this. So they have this rule. He's defined, they have a rule that in November and December, that's very specific, they take those string lights down. And in the description of the string lights, he specified that they were white. Some brothers and sisters like to hang white string lights, but not in November and December. And they couldn't be colored because obviously if they were either hung in November or December, even if they were there for the rest of the year, or, and least of all, but even or, they had any other colors of the string lights aside from white, it could be a cause for stumbling. That is the entire implication of what he's saying. And he's using that example to highlight how normal they are and how the governing body doesn't like to make rules. And we don't need to be too rigid and we don't need to have rules. But also, I guarantee that at Bethel, it is not just November and December. It is a specific time of day. And in fact, the November end would be problematic because the 31st of October is also Halloween. So they probably have a set rule that they wanted before that point. So he's saying November, December to keep it normal, but it's probably specifically the 20th of October or something that you've got to take it down. And it needs to be down by midday or something, right? And then in addition to that, there would also be a cultural enforcement, around whatever is sent out in the email, that is the formal rules. There would also be the informal cultural pressure where you do not want to be seen to be the last one to be taking yours down or the first one to be putting yours up, because then you are stretching, you're closer to the boundaries, to the limits than everyone else. And you probably also want to wait for someone with more seniority than you to go first in putting them back up, that kind of thing. It's complete and utter nonsense. And again, this is the example that he's choosing from to highlight the point about how we don't need to make rules and we don't need to treat everyone like children. Anyway, back to this month's broadcast. The next thing that's interesting is that whilst I thought that the previous update, I was suspicious that that was AI, they have actually used AI in this broadcast. And look, it's a stock piece of footage which you can find online. I found it on Reddit. Someone had linked where you can find this specific clip. But nonetheless, I think that this is them dipping a toe in the water. There has been recently a lot of talk about AI within the organization. They have sent out letters to the congregations asking for people with skills in certain areas, including in AI. This is a distinct point where they have introduced, unless I've missed it, and there's been something prior to this, but they've introduced an AI clip into the broadcast for the very first time. And it's a very low stakes clip because, as I said, it is a piece of stock footage. It's just there to illustrate a point. It's not like a feature, drama or anything. It's nothing big. It's just like a bit of B-roll. And it's not theirs, right? That's crucial because that gives them a bit of plausible deniability. And so they can just dip a toe into these AI waters and they can see, okay, what's the response when we put this in the broadcast? Who notices? How many people notice? How many people complain? What is the feedback? What do people think about that? Is it an issue? Okay, great. And just wait. In the next few months, they will test the waters again. They will do something else with AI and they will see how far they can take it, just with little B-roll footage like this, they'll just start introducing it a little bit to see what they can get away with. And look, it doesn't really matter because before too long, it will be so hard to distinguish between AI and what's real that you wouldn't even notice this. Like, you know, this, even now, this is a pretty bad clip, AI-generated clip. If they really wanted a good one, they would be able to get one that you would not be able to notice was, in fact, AI. So I'm almost suspicious that they want this to be noticed so that that toe is being specifically dipped in the water. Anyway, that's just my crazy little fan theory. So the next little clip that stood out to me was kind of a continuation of something I brought up in my previous video about how Jehovah's Witnesses just say things really weirdly. They just put this sort of obfuscation around a clear term, like just to specifically not talk like a normal person. Like, I don't know what it is. And they do it all the time in a broadcast. It happens all the time at conventions. And it does filter down to the local level at the hall and even to individuals talking with each other, specifically as an in-group form of communication, right? People, we all know that this is not how we would communicate with someone on the outside, but in amongst Jehovah's Witnesses, every now and then these little weird things just creep in. And this example is just hilarious because, again, this is just Stephen Lett trying to introduce a fun little story to kind of normalize or make relatable a point that he's trying to get across. And he just does it in the weirdest way possible. Because rather than just saying, you could give a dog to a kid on a farm but not to a Bethelite, he says, a dog may be a good gift to a young one in a rural setting. A young one in a rural setting. Like, why? Why speak like this?
One brother gave this example. A puppy might make a fine gift to a young one living in a rural setting, but it's a terrible gift to a Bethelite.
This reminds me of the story of the 3 young ones who were of legal age, but they were still young ones, and they entered through the door of a drinking establishment, and they said to the man behind the counter of the drinking establishment, like, even just telling a joke, he sounds like the autistic character in a sitcom. It just, why? Anyway, then he decides to move on from his stand-up routine and not quit his day job and get straight back to begging for money.
In addition to helping brothers in need directly, we can indirectly help them by making donations to the worldwide work. The governing body prayerfully strives to use wisely these precious, dedicated funds to help our dear brothers who've been afflicted by natural or man-made disasters and who urgently need suitable kingdom halls and assistance in many other ways. Speaking of the need for kingdom halls, as just one example, please look at these pictures from the Philippines. Here are 6 before and after photographs. And what do you think was the individual average cost of these 6 new, simplified, but dignified kingdom halls? $21,000 US. Please think about this. Jehovah's physical gifts, such as the rain, sunshine, and oxygen, are recurring. What's one way to imitate this aspect of Jehovah's giving? Well, 1 Corinthians 16:2 says, "On the first day of every week, each of you should set something aside according to his own means." In harmony with this scriptural principle, many have chosen to set something aside each month by scheduling recurring online donations.
Rather than commenting on that, I just thought I'd replay the little bit at the end where he licks his lips, and then move to this parody of how pastors at megachurches basically exploit the flock for money, right? And just seeing these 2 things back to back. Now, this parody was actually so good that a lot of people thought it was real. And so rather than, finding a bunch of examples of people in reality doing this and putting them side by side, I just thought this would go very nicely side by side.
To Springfield now, where megachurch Cornerstone Christian is now selling personal seat licenses. The pastor says the new season ticket model will guarantee congregants a seat every Sunday.
Obviously, with the renovations of this new sanctuary coming this fall, it costs money. And I think this is a great way to really have an influx of cash into the congregation here. A lot of parents are stressed on Sunday morning, trying to make it to church. Are we going to have a, seat on time? Is there going to be room for us? I think with a personal seat license, obviously this is, an affluent area of town. So we thought, why not as a church, take advantage of that revenue stream.
Pastor Doug says this new ticket model will aid in traffic and congestion, but will also help in other ways.
There's a lot of people, that we've heard in this church that, are fighting over, that's my seat. I've been here for 25 years. This is where I sit. And there's a lot of confusion. We got a lot of new people in here that don't know that those seats are, traditionally other people sit there. It's not obviously mandatory for someone to buy a personal seat license. We will have an auxiliary television set up in the pavilion on the west side of the parking lot if people would like to worship over there. And obviously, like from a church leadership standpoint, I think it's important for us to now know which each of these seats are now licensed. It's just going to be easier for us to know who's a church and who's not.
Honestly, I kind of hope that the governing body is paying attention, because this model could work, right? A season ticket for a seat, especially for conventions, this would work really well. It would solve a lot of the problems of people rushing in as soon as the doors open and fighting over seats, right? And it's not as though they're above this, right? Don't pretend that you're better than this. Just sell the seats if that's what you want to do. Just sell them. Anyway, this next clip is honestly horrible. And the reason that I'm including this tragic story is because this tragic story was included in the broadcast. And the reason that stories like this are included in the broadcast is it's so cynical.
Some men came to the car and threatened him and my mom with machine guns to get him out of the car to kidnap him.
We heard a noise. We all got scared and ran outside. And then I remember that my dad was on the ground and some men had shot him.
He was just left there. I just picked him up in my arms.
He was taken to the hospital, and a few hours later, he died. My dad's last words were, "Jehovah, protect my daughters. Take care of my daughters and my little lady." That meant my mom.
So as a PME, I would watch something like that, and I would think to myself, wow, if they can get through that, how faith strengthening, Jehovah was there for them. He'll be there for me. I'm probably never going to face something as horrible as that specific event. So having these extreme examples really highlights just how it gives you a bit of perspective that, maybe your problems are not so bad and that Jehovah's got you and he will help you like he's helped them. They felt Jehovah's hand helping them. He doesn't let us get tempted beyond what we can bear. And they've coped with this. So therefore, you can cope with whatever, right? That's kind of how I would interpret it. And I think that's a pretty common way that most PMEs would view an experience like this. But as a POMO, this is so cynical because they take these extreme examples. They do it all the time. They take these extreme tragedies and they really just capitalize on, well, firstly, this group, this family are now just bound. And it's such a common experience where there's a tragedy, there's a family tragedy, there's a death. And, not just any death, but like a really, someone dying, ahead of their time from some specific tragedy. It's like now that person becomes a martyr and an emotional anchor to the faith. So these people, if for them to ever leave, it just becomes ridiculous. So much harder, so much harder because you are now, it feels like, and it is a very emotion-based religion. It feels like you are leaving that person. For them to leave, it would feel as though they were leaving their dying father, right? He's just, it would be emotionally, it would be like he's just been shot and he's lying there bleeding out on the ground and they are walking away from him in that moment. That's how it would feel to them to leave, right? So, and they want to, the organization wants to carry that emotional entrapment and distribute it through the program to all the other witnesses. And to say, well, this is the hope that these people have for their family member. And so if you, by, questioning things, if you start to leave it behind, you are also leaving these other people behind, right? So it's like kind of this, a second-hand version of that, where you are now like guilty of this wrongdoing. You are in some way taking away the life of someone's family member by you leaving, by you not believing it anymore. That's kind of the emotional manipulation that goes along with this. And by highlighting these extreme examples, it feeds into the culture of fear within the organization, because the fear is there of, and they don't play on this overtly as often right now as they were even 5 years ago, right? But it is still very much overtly done, but they do it culturally a lot more now, where you would also kind of internalize, like, a lot of this sort of stuff would be going on in the background of your mind as a PME, that these terrible tragedies, well, we know that the Great Tribulation, a tribulation such as mankind has never experienced before nor will experience again, is looming. So when you view these experiences and you see the tribulations that other people have in reality actually gone through, you have to kind of level up, like turn up the volume on how bad the Great Tribulation is going to be, because it has to be worse than this. It has to be worse than this. The scale of it, the emotional impact of it. Some really terrible things are going to happen, and they may happen to me, they may not happen to me, but like some horrible things are going to happen, and everybody's going to feel the weight of this extended tribulation. So even though you may not think that this exact thing is going to happen to you, it does feed into that overall, like pretty much everything, the whole program is all about fear, obligation, and guilt. And this is really feeding onto the fear and the obligation angle. And obviously, if you don't then meet up to that obligation, which is being fed by experiences like this, then you feel the guilt, right? So there's no escape from that. As long as you remain indoctrinated and under the weight of that fear, obligation, and guilt, it is really hard to free one's mind. And this is why, in spite of things as overt as what Stephen Lett just said about, recurring monthly donations, in spite of that, people will not wake up to that. Some people will, but the majority will not. And the reason I think for that is that it's more than a comment that is needed. It's not any one thing that is said or done. People also need space. Individual comments can give individual PMEs pause for thought, and that creates that they then create the space themselves where something just catches them and hits them on the wrong angle, and it knocks them off kilter, and they're off their footing from their hamster wheel, and then all of a sudden they feel as though something's not right, and they take a moment. This is like the biggest danger to the organization, is people taking a moment to think about something. Because if they take that moment to think about it, that is what gives them the opportunity to wake themselves up. But they don't, because the stakes are so high that it's kind of within their best interests to not take that moment. And they sort of know it on some level, that it's best to just not think about things too much. Speaking of not thinking about things too much, the next little interesting clip is the return of Sonia Eriksson. Now, this is funny because they've taken clips of a longer video that is deleted, removed from the website because of or in relation to the trial in Norway that happened, which is its whole own interesting thing. But by doing this, by including these clips, it would allow the illusion of normality. It's sort of similar to what I mentioned in my last video about accounts and the transparency of the finances of the organization that David Splane alluded to, right? He's paying homage to the idea of financial transparency in such a way that to a believing witness, that indicates that we do have financial transparency. So these little notes, these little things, I don't know, it's a risky play for them, honestly, to include references to this video, because I don't understand why they would do it. I mean, the internet is forever. So them removing the video, even in relation to the Norway case, I have no idea how that actually was supposed to help them, or even if it did help them. I don't understand, because it was already submitted to the courts. So them removing it does not really change the fact that they put all the effort into producing it. And now, even whilst it is removed, the fact that they're referencing back to it, their legal battles in Norway are not over. So I don't really understand what they're doing. It's kind of like if you were engaged in some legal dispute and your lawyer had said, just don't say anything to anyone about this thing, right? Just don't talk about it at all. And then you talk about it. Like, even if the comments that you're saying about the thing are benign, just don't talk about it. I don't understand what they think they're doing. Okay, this last one is the song. Now, I know. I'm not going to subject you to the whole thing. This music video, though, this one really stood out to me. There is a lot going on in these lyrics, especially. So I want to break this down a little bit. And even right off the bat, the way that Stephen Lett introduces this is already telling.
Jehovah is generous in taking the time to see us not as a large group of worshipers, but as unique individuals. That's how we see each of our hardworking sisters, too. This is beautifully expressed in this month's music video.
Okay, so Jehovah is basically a synonym for the organization / the governing body, right? And this organization does not allow people to be seen as individuals. It just doesn't. It discourages it at every turn. You're not allowed to pursue your own interests. You're not allowed to pursue higher education. Any talent that you have has to be suppressed or directed through to a lens through which it can be used in the organization. And all praise goes to Jehovah, right? Which again is, once you wake up and realize, synonymous with the organization / the governing body. Now, this is not obviously how I thought of things and how I saw it as a PME, but upon waking up, this is something that I've really struggled with, is realizing that I have this need to be seen and heard, which has not been properly met for the majority of my life. And I've had a very good life. I'm not complaining. No complaints. I love my family. Fantastic. No issues at all. No blame at all. However, the culture of the organization is such that it does not allow for the celebration of individuals. I'll give you an example. Right now, one of my young relatives, I'm going to keep things incredibly vague here, but he is engaging in a competition, an event that he's honestly crushing it, right? He is doing amazingly. But there's almost no acknowledgement of that. To the extent that there is acknowledgement, it's almost something that needs to be apologized for, that he is being allowed to compete within this space, because the underlying subtext is that, well, as a witness, we don't want to get too immersed in competition. We don't want to go too far. You don't want to be too successful, because if you get too successful in a particular area, then that leads to things like, university, or in a sporting context to the Olympics, or whatever it might be, right? So it's not discussed, it's not talked about, and it's not celebrated. And he is crushing it. He's doing really freaking well. And he should have this cheer squad behind him. But he doesn't, because the culture of this organization is so self-effacing to the individual. This comment about individuals being seen by the organization, or specifically by Jehovah, right? Again, as a PME, I would have accepted that quite readily, and I wouldn't have had a problem with it, because I would not have thought of it in any of this way. But in reality, what's happening here is that you're part of an organization which requires you to be a part of the collective. It's completely collectivist. There is no value in the individual. And you're being told that you're being seen and you're being heard, when in reality you're not. You don't have a voice. And this is especially true of women. Now, obviously, I cannot fully speak to that. And so I'm not going to get bogged down into all of the nuance of this specifically with women. But let's get into this music video, and that there's a few other, it's a doozy.
To help you understand that we all can see your worth.
So in Jehovah's Witness land, basically every individual needs to view themselves as being lower than others, right? And so as a result of that, it's legal, it's allowed for you to see someone else's worth, but it's not really legal or allowed for you to see your own worth, right? You need to be, again, self-effacing, and you need to see other people and the value in other people, but you can't see your own value, right? And look, a Jehovah's Witness listening to this would say, no, that's not true at all. We need to, how can we love others as we would love ourselves? Loving ourselves is a prerequisite, right? We're told to love ourselves, right? And that's true. You are told that, but try acting that out. Try actually expressing and showing love for yourself and living in a way that is demonstrative of the love that you show yourself, not in a, quote unquote, selfish way. But this is the problem, because the lines are blurred between what is selfish versus what is an acceptable expression of loving oneself or prioritizing oneself, looking after oneself. And you'll find that culturally, the focus is on making sure that people feel very low. They have a very low opinion of themselves. And this is doubly true for women, because women cannot climb the corporate ladder structure of Jehovah's Witnesses at all. So there is no role or position that they can hold. So the only thing that they have to do is to think very little of themselves.
Whenever you find that you're hard on yourself, I hope these words help.
But also subtext, this entire religion is based around fear, obligation, and guilt, and so it's good for you to continue to be hard on yourself. You will be hard on yourself, but I hope that these words help, but also continue to be hard on yourself. See, I'm not the abuser, you're the abuser. I'm not the one that's being hard on you, you're the one being hard on you. I'm the one telling you not to be too hard on yourself, but also do continue to be really hard on yourself because fear, obligation, and guilt.
We see you, sister, always a smile on your face. You keep on going, though you may doubt your precious place. If you could only see yourself through our eyes, then you would know how we see you. We see you, sister.
Alright, so this chorus, this is why I wanted to comment on this video, because there is so much, like every line of this chorus is just jam-packed with cultiness. So, we see you, okay? Like, organizationally, no you don't. You don't. We don't see you. Always a smile on your face. Now that sounds like a compliment, but culturally, it's just an expectation. It's kind of a command. Always a smile on your face. And then you keep on going. Again, a command. You've just got to keep on going. That's the answer to everything. My wife has been struggling with this lately because she is like physically and mentally questioning, right? And she was hoping that it would be easier with me out and about as, look, in terms of me being out and about, I'm not quite like labeled an apostate per se. I would be if this was discovered, but I'm out and about in the sense that I'm like not going to meetings, I don't believe it, all that sort of thing, right? And she thought that having that out in the open might make it easier for her because she might be able to get additional support and whatnot from the people in the congregation, right? Wrong. Because the support that she gets is 95% keep going. 95% of the support is comments like, well, you know what you need to do. You know what you need to do is you now need to be really spiritually strong. You just need to keep praying. You just need to keep going. You just need to, and it's like, it's just all this obligation. The thing that you actually need that's going to support you right now is to remind you of all of the burden of obligation that is placed upon you. So this keep going, again, culturally within Jehovah's Witnesses, that is a huge deal. You always need to keep going. You need to stay active. That is baked into the terminology of what it means to be a witness. You are an active witness. There is no such thing as a passive witness. It's active. Then the next line is, though you may doubt your precious place. Again, you may doubt your place. You are not able to think of yourself as having a place, especially as a sister in the congregation, because there is no place for you to have. You don't get a nice fancy title. The best title that you might have has the suffix wife, right? You're a circuit overseer's wife. You're a Bethelite's wife. Like, you could be a Bethelite, sure, but you're not, you're a branch committee member's wife. You're a governing body member's wife. So there is no precious place. There is no place for women except to be the back and the legs of the organization that does all of the heavy lifting, all of the hard work. The majority of everything that is done within the organization is done by sisters, but they don't actually have a place. And despite what this song says, they are encouraged, or it is put upon them, to doubt their place. Again, it's like that abusive relationship. The abuser is telling you, don't doubt your precious place, whilst doing and saying all of these other things that cause you to doubt that place, right? So you're being told one thing and having another thing handed to you. It's just gaslighting. And then the last line is, if only you could see yourself through our eyes. Again, you can't, because culturally, you have to view yourself as lesser to everyone else. And so you can see everyone else as better than you, but you can never see the version of yourself that they see. That's like, it's illegal. You can't do that. It's not allowed. Also, there was just one little clip at the start of this course that they showed, and this really hit home for me because I was serving as a need greeter, right, in a foreign country and doing all of that. And I've had experiences similar to what is shown in this little clip that I'll just keep replaying here as I talk about it for a moment. But where you are this young person talking to an older person and sharing everything that you know about the truth, right? About life, the universe, and everything. You're telling them all of this stuff. And this old person who you've come to their home, in their village, in their culture, you've learnt their language just so that you can tell them the things that you know. And I had some amazing experiences talking to different people in that context. But I wish that I had done a lot more listening. I wish that I had heard what they had to say, just even to get different perspectives on what it really meant, what this specific village represents to them, what their village life meant, what they had learned, how they saw the world, you know? And you've got this person who looks like 1,000 years old, and they're being shown and taught things from this corporation by this young person, when really the young person, it's not to say that that can't be a two-way dialogue and conversation, but as a Jehovah's Witness, you enter every conversation with a non-Jehovah's Witness from the place that you don't actually have anything that you can learn from them at all, because you have the truth and they don't, right? You know all that there is to be known, all the important stuff you know, and you don't enter conversations with genuine curiosity. You enter it with just enough curiosity to find a way to connect whatever they're saying to whatever you're there to say. And it's just such a shame. It's such a tragedy, because in this little video, that young sister could be learning so much from this random, ancient person. They could be learning so much about what they've seen and what their life is like, especially given the juxtaposition between what it appears in this particular instance is this modern technological world that we now live in and how quickly things have shifted, versus this person who is detached from all of that and how they genuinely view the world. Like, you actually can literally travel through time and space. Like, when you travel to a different culture, to a different country, you are going back in time. I remember that I visited Cambodia. I knew some people there who were serving, and I'd visited, and they were in Phnom Penh, and it's very poor, and it's a whole thing. But there was an older Japanese brother in the congregation there, and he made the comment that modern day Phnom Penh reminded him of the Japan that he grew up in post World War II. And that blew my mind, because Japan now, you think of Japan now, and it's nothing at all like if you compare Tokyo and Phnom Penh, very, very different places. They are not at all on par as the same at all. Like, it's just totally different. But that's what I mean when I say that you can travel through time. Maybe you can wind back the clock a bit on Tokyo, right? And all of a sudden it starts to resemble a lot of Phnom Penh. And so by visiting Phnom Penh now, you can also get a window into what Tokyo looked like then, for example. Or by visiting this random village now, you're able to get a window back in time, potentially centuries, of this culture that is largely undisturbed by all of the modern conveniences and inconveniences that we have. And you can really learn a lot from people in that context. But as witnesses, we would potentially go to all of these crazy places and do all of this cool stuff, and we would completely miss this opportunity because we were never there to listen.
You're always looking out to help behind the scenes, without the hope of praise for all you do for those in need.
Okay, so on the face of it, this lyric can be taken two ways, right? And I know that Pimis and Pomos would just by default take this two totally separate ways, and it can seem like a cheap shot to say, oh, well, you just need to help out behind the scenes and you don't have any hope of praise, right? When reality is most Pimis would internalize this and interpret this, and maybe this is even the spirit in which it is said, that you're helping out in spite of the fact that it, is not seen by everyone, and you are doing so just genuinely and not in pursuit of praise, right? Great. But again, the problem with that is that in the context of the broadcast, in the context of the culture of Jehovah's Witnesses, this comes across a lot like a command and a set standard that you need to follow. And also that negative way that it could be taken, just know your place and be behind the scenes and do your work there and don't be seen and don't have any hope of praise. Well, there is also validity to that within the organization and within the culture and everything, right? That's valid, that's relevant, that's not just, it's not just an interpretation of, oh, well, someone could take it to mean this way. That's just not what it means at all. It's like, no, but it also kind of does mean that. Like, that also does happen a lot. On and sort of winds out with what has become such a cliche of Jehovah's Witnesses videos and the emotional manipulation. This is like, it's a common ingredient. I feel like the first time that they used this may have been part of a convention, musical interlude kind of a thing, or it was possibly an original song or a broadcast. I don't know. But the first time that they did this, right, it was, I remember as a PB, it was genuinely like, wow, I think it was probably talking about like, that kingdom smile, and the true happiness, the happiest people ever, the best life ever, the happiest people on earth, all that sort of stuff. I thought that, and I felt that, and it had its desired effect at the time. But even as a PME, this has been done to death. It is just, and look, this one is not even as awkward as some of them. Sometimes they are just so awkward and the camera just lingers on an individual person for just a couple of seconds too long. And it's like, what is going on? Like, is this like when you do a photo shoot with your kids or something and the photographer is like, pulling out the toys and the silly faces or whatever to try and get them to look at the camera and to smile at the camera? Like, what's going on behind the camera to get these people to have this chuckle? Are they telling them like lame jokes? Is Brother Let's Stand Up routine from earlier being used? A puppy may be a good gift for a young one in a rural setting. Ha 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 ha. Is that what they're laughing at? Like, it's so awkward and forced and fabricated that even as a PB, like this kind of stuff, at best it's cringy, but at worst, honestly, I think this ingredient on its own is being overused so much that it could potentially be the thing that gives someone enough pause for thought to wake them up. Because it's just like, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? Why do they continue to do these awkward smiling montages? And there's one bit, I'll loop it here for a moment as we look at it. This reminds me of a meme that I saw recently, which was of a kid just sort of standing there awkwardly, and the meme caption was like, when my mum calls me out of my room to invite the visitor to see how much I've grown, right? It's just like, that's what this kind of feels like. It's like, quick, come show the camera how happy you are. Come on, stand in front of the camera, chuckle, go on, chuckle.
Dear sisters, you are wonderful examples. We appreciate all that you do. We love you dearly.
So this is another one that even as a PME, I would find very grating. And again, I don't know what this is like from a sister's perspective, but to me, this kind of thing always felt like it was just trying too hard. And the fact that you were singling out a group of people to make this specific comment, which felt like a rebuttal to a complaint that no one was allowed to make, right? No one's actually allowed to say the thing of like, within the culture of Jehovah's Witnesses, oh, this organization is misogynistic and this organization doesn't treat women fairly or doesn't respect women or whatever, right? No one's allowed to say that. But it felt like they were always responding to people saying that, even though no one said it. And it just feels really fake. And they would do this with other groups too. This is another sort of aspect of the collective nature of Jehovah's Witnesses, right? When you have a collective group think thing going on, they feel a need, and their outlines, their talk outlines are horrific for this. Like, I hate their talk outlines. It's so bad. Because if you have a talk outline that is directed at young people, it will say, young ones often face these problems, and it lists out all these generic problems. In their talks where they say many people are facing economic pressures, many people are facing health issues, or they may be facing this, or they may be facing that, or they may be they just like list off a thing, like a bunch of bad news that might be happening to a bunch of people at any given point. And it's so generic. And that is in, I don't know, I haven't checked. I don't know if it's in the majority of public talk outlines, but it's in a lot of public talk outlines. Like, it literally lists that. That is an ingredient within the outline that is there to be given. And whether giving a talk or hearing a talk, I always hated that. Like, I would never do that. I'd see that on the outline. I'd be like, that is trash. That is going straight in the bin. I'm not doing that. Because if you are someone who is actually struggling with the thing, you can apply the thing to your own situation. You're going to do that. If a speaker says, some people are really struggling, life can be really hard at times. And if you are in the middle of a really hard thing, you're going to apply that to yourself. And you go, yes, I am struggling. Life is hard at the moment. You don't need them to list off the fact that you might have diabetes or cancer or the death of a loved one or whatever, just been laid off from work. You don't need them to cite your specific example, and yet they insist on doing it. And back to, I know this is a tangent, but back to the groupthink and individuals and all of that. They kind of don't treat people as individuals. They treat people as groups of, you are collectively, you are the cancer sufferers. You are the ones who have been laid off from work. You are the ones undergoing persecution. You are young ones, right? So they speak to these groups of people. They speak to young ones. They speak to sisters. And whenever they say things to a group, it just sounds disingenuous because, well, how can you say, we love you, our dear sisters? Like, what does that mean? It just loses all meaning. It means even less, a lot less than just saying, we love our brothers and sisters worldwide, like our worldwide brotherhood. That has meaning to it, right? Because it's just this whole collective group. But as soon as you divide that one collective group into a subgroup and you say, well, we love our young ones, we love our sisters, we love our older ones, like, it just loses all meaning because it's like, what are you even attempting to say? It seems, because it's at the exclusion of nothing, you're not excluding brothers by saying that you love sisters in that context, right? You're saying that we love you and we see you when you actually don't. At least when you say the worldwide brotherhood, that is at the exclusion of the world out there, the darkness and the gnashing of teeth and all those horrible worldly people, right? It means something because it is at the exclusion of something else. But when you say we love our young ones, we love our older ones, it's like, yes, but you love all of the individual groups you could list off and name, and you love all of the people who are suffering, all of the different things that you could list off and name. So you don't need to list off and name them. Anyway, that's it. Rant over. Bye.